But here's the thing you have to remember. How you do one thing is how you do everything. So I might use examples in other areas of your life, but if you're not showing up in one area, you're not going to show up in another area. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 welcome. I hope you know what time it is. It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. E is in the house. It is such an honor and privilege to spend some time with you talking about what it takes to be a world-class CISO. However, I always like setting the parameters. I am focused on making you the best CISO possible, for you to crush it, for you to be the Chief Information Security Officer that is the model for all Chief Information Security Officers. However, in teaching you that, I'm also teaching you other things that can impact your life in other areas. I sometimes get friends of mine that listen to some of my episodes and go, Eric, what are you doing? I go, what do you mean, what am I doing? That episode had nothing to do with being a CISO. I'm like, really? What episode was it? Oh, well, that episode where you spent the whole time talking about limiting beliefs and removing limiting beliefs and being limitless. And I'm like, did you listen to the whole episode? They said, yes, it was twice. And you don't think it had anything to do with being a CISO? I'm like, no, it just had to do with living and life and to your full potential. And I'm like, if you don't believe that you're world class, if you have a limiting belief that says, I am not CISO material, do you think that would impact your ability to be a CISO? He's like, yes. I'm like, so it has everything to do with being a CISO. But here's the thing you have to remember. How you do one thing is how you do everything. So I might use examples in other areas of your life, but if you're not showing up in one area, you're not going to show up in another area. I know very, very few people that have amazing, amazing careers, but are truly struggling in another area, right? It all goes together. How you do one thing is how you do everything. So it might not always seem like I'm talking CISO, right? But the point is, if you don't have that foundation, if you are walking around thinking, like I did in the last episode, that executives don't listen to me, nobody respects me, I'm not an equal, it's going to be really hard, if not impossible, for you to be world class and to even be an effective CISO if you don't have those things in place. But I do hear you. I do want to once in a while, or most of the time, I should say, focus on what you really want. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what are the core things that you must do and must know to be a very effective CISO. And I'm using that word carefully because what I found is world class assumes you're effective. Right? World class is putting a really nice polish on that automobile. But if that automobile is dented, missing a bumper, has a flat tire, right? And it's not effective, then yeah, I can shine up parts of it, but it's not going to be world class. So what I realized is it's important for us to step back and say, okay, how do we get you to be as effective as possible? And then once you are super effective, then we can crank it up to world class. And by the way, if you're currently looking to become a CISO and you're finding your first job as a CISO, these techniques I'm going to teach are going to be gold because it's going to help you show up differently during the interview process than any other candidate. And you're going to get the job before anyone else does. So being an effective CISO means if you're looking to get a job, showing up as an effective CISO even during the job interview process. So whether you're looking to, interviewing, or currently a CISO, these things are how you must show up. First and most important, to get a job as a CISO or be an effective CISO, you must understand the business. What is the business that the company you want to work for or you work for is currently in? Who are their customers? How do they make money? What is their growth plan? What is their 5-year historical revenue growth? What is their profitability? What are their margins? That is critical because everyone forgets the first and last letter of your title, and they only focus on information security. I see so many people that have the CISO title, but they're really just information security. They're really just an information security professional, very knowledgeable about information security or cybersecurity. They're very good at it, and when people have questions, they can answer technical questions very, very well. But the reason why they either don't get a job or they're not effective is because they forgot that they're a chief officer. I talk with a lot of executives. I talk with a lot of recruiters. I talk with a lot of HR people. And the number one reason why somebody doesn't get the job as a CISO, the number one reason why somebody who is a CISO gets fired, or the number one reason why somebody who is a CISO is not viewed as an effective CISO, always comes down to the same answer. Eric, they don't understand our business. They don't understand our revenue model. They don't understand our customers and how they work and how they operate. Because your job, and this is gonna be a shift, and this is where I can always tell security engineers from CISOs on how you react to this statement. Your job as a CISO is not to lock down and secure the enterprise. Your job is to balance risk to allow the organization to maximize its opportunity to make revenue and profit. Business is about risk. Organizations take risk all the time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but the really good CEOs, the CEOs that make those huge bonuses and make all that money, are ones that have such a good track record. They have such good pattern recognition that yes, they make decisions that are risky, but they're calculated risk, and 90% of the time they pay out in their advantage because they understand business. That's an effective CISO. Is they're going to periodically take risks. They're going to do things that a security engineer is going to say you shouldn't do or you can't do. There is a risk here, yes. World-class security engineers are trained to have zero risk tolerance. All risks are bad, and world-class security engineers are great at pointing out why you shouldn't do something. You shouldn't do that because of this, 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 and this. But here's the problem. If companies were run and listened to world-class security engineers, everyone would go out of business because everything has a cyber risk associated with it. And according to them, you shouldn't take any risk, and therefore they would never do anything. They would never have any customers, right? They would never use technology, and they essentially would go out of business. So world-class security engineers point out all of the risks. Effective CISOs step back and say, what is the value and benefit to the revenue and profitability of the company? What is the risk and exposure? And is that risk acceptable? Is the value or benefit worth the risk? Yes, do it. No, and here's the magic. Here's the magic of an effective CISO. If the value and benefit is not worth the risk, world-class CISOs don't say no. They say, here's how to do it by managing the risk correctly. Because here's the reality. If there is something that has value and benefit to the organization, if there is something that's going to generate large amount of revenue and large amount of profit to the organization, a chief officer is going to figure out a way to do it. Chief officers maximize the revenue and profit. So if there's this opportunity that's going to bring in tremendous revenue and profit, a chief officer is going to figure out a way to make it work. So if the risk is too great, if this is too big a risk, a CISO is going to come up with a plan to make it work. They're going to come up with a game plan that says, hey, I know this is how you proposed, but this is too big an exposure. Here's an alternative way that gets us the same or similar revenue and profit, but does it with a much lower and acceptable level of risk to the organization. They come up with a plan to make it work. But you can only do that if you truly understand the business, if you're truly focused on the business. This is an area that I run across all the time with CISOs. I work in a lot of different industries, but I often spend a lot of time in companies that are doing acquisitions. That's one of my many specialties, that companies that are acquiring new companies, how do they integrate that company into the existing infrastructure? And most of the time, the reality is, if you're a larger, mature organization and you're acquiring a smaller startup, you're going to have better security. They're going to have worse security, right? They're going to take more risks than you're willing to take. And what I always hear from the CISOs are, Eric, why don't the execs involve us early? I keep telling the executives, when you're thinking about acquiring a new company, can we please be involved? And they don't listen. And basically they acquire the company and then they say, figure it out. And I go and I talk to the execs and I go, listen, why aren't you involving your CISO early? right? Making this decision without their input, all you're doing is making a lot more work and making a bigger mess for them. And you know what the execs always tell me, 100% of the time? They go, Eric, when we involve the CISOs early on in the discussion, all they do is sit there and say, no, this is too risky, their security is too bad, it's too big an exposure, it's too hard an integration, we shouldn't acquire them. They are only looking at information security. They are not looking at the value benefit. They're not looking to the customer base. They're not looking to the upsell. They're not looking to the revenue. They're not looking to the profit. So they're just a distraction. So we're not going to invite them to the meeting because all they're going to do is try to put up roadblocks, and they're not looking at it as a chief officer. Very interesting, right? If you're not involved in discussions that you think you should be involved in, you should ask yourself why. And most of the time it's simple. It's either because you're adding no value, or in this case, you're adding negative value. What if you went to one of those meetings as a CISO and you said, we should absolutely acquire this company? The growth potential, the access to customers, the upsell, the leveraging between our products and their products, the revenue and the profitability increase are off the charts. We absolutely should do it. But here's how we should roll out the integration. Then they will listen. Then they will involve you in those discussions. But until you understand the business, you understand the importance of the C and the O, you're not going to be in those meetings. So that's the first piece of being an effective CISO. Understand business and recognize your job as a CISO is to increase and maximize revenue and profitability. That is your primary job, but you do it in a way and you propose solutions that minimize the cyber risk to the organization. But you don't ever prioritize and say information security is more important than the business, and therefore we shouldn't do this. And right there, I just want to do a gut check. If when I said that, you're like, Eric's wrong, that is not correct. There are cases where cybersecurity is more important and companies should not do things. If that was your mindset, you are a cybersecurity engineer. You are thinking and acting like a cybersecurity engineer. And if you, be nice, remember I love you, don't get mad at me. But if you then take on the CISO title, you are pretending to be a CISO because you're not. If you're going to put cybersecurity before the business, you are a security engineer, which we need, but that is not CISO. A CISO focuses on the business first and putting security in a way that it helps the business. That's what we call about using cybersecurity as a business enabler. And I can always tell when I give keynotes and when I go into companies and help and coach and train their CISOs who are still thinking and acting as security engineers and who are thinking and acting like CISOs. Security and engineers focus on the middle letters. Information security is the top priority. CISOs focus on chief officer as the top priority. Next important thing to be an effective CISO. Recognize there are many ways to accomplish what you want to accomplish. There are many ways to reduce risk. There are many products that you can use to effectively secure an organization. World-class security engineers tend to be focused on a single solution. We must use product X. And if we're not using product X, it's wrong. We have to rip out our current product and put in product X. And you see this a lot. This is one of the biggest mistakes that CISOs make when they get a new job. When they become a job of CISO in an organization, the biggest mistake is you come in and in the first 90 days, you try to change everything. You try to make it my way or the highway. This is how I did things before. These are the companies I use. This is the vendors I trust. This is the reference architecture I always use. You're not using that, so you're wrong. And we have to rip all this stuff out and put all this new stuff in. And all that's doing is chaos and confusion. Because here's the reality. Are you really telling me that the current security is ineffective? It's zero. No, it has value. So what you need to do is go in and say, okay, they're using product X. I prefer product Y. But how much more effective is product Y? Is it really 10% more effective, 20% more effective? And are there ways that we can tune or adjust the current product to make it close or effective as product Y? Then, what is the impact and cost of ripping out, replacing, and putting in a new product? And when you step back and say, okay, product Y might give us 5% more security, but it's going to cause disruption. It's going to overwork my current staff, which is already too small, and it's going to cost us $1 million. With everything we currently need to do, with all of the risks, let's step back and look at big picture, all of the risks. Is this 5% increase disrupting our staff in an enterprise and spending $1.1 million, is that really the highest priority and most important thing we should be doing right now? Or are there other higher priority items or other things we can do to complement what's there without having to rip out and rebuild the entire infrastructure? World-class CISOs or effective CISOs prioritize. They don't go in and do laser focused. World-class security engineers love to do what I call shotgun. What I mean by that is they go in and they find one issue. And that's all. That's all they're looking at. This is a problem. We are using an inferior technology, and I have a better technology that will increase effectiveness by 11%. We must do it. And they are obsessed. World-class CISOs are a shotgun. They step back and say, okay, what are all the possible things we can do? What are all the possible risks? What are all the possible exposures that are out there? And based on threats, vulnerabilities, likelihood and impact of these occurring against the impact to revenue and profitability of our current and future customers, what are the highest priority risks that are unacceptable that we must be focusing our time, energy, and effort on? Because the reality is this: any organization that is using technology is not going to be 100% secure. Remember our rule: 100% security equals zero functionality. Or remember the law of cyber. The law of cyber is just like the law of gravity. It's always at play, whether you like it or not. And the law of cyber is simple. When you add functionality, you decrease security. Put it another way, when you add functionality, you increase risk. So the reality is, if you have functionality in your company, which you do, you're going to have risks. And most of them you need to accept because you don't have the time, energy, resources, or people to fix every single risk. So if you go in and your line is so low that all these risks are unacceptable, that's why you don't get listened to. Because if you go in and you tell the executives, we need $100 million to fix every risk, and they're only making $50 million, they're going to laugh you out of the room. You have to recognize that, okay, I might not like it, I might not love it, but there's a set of risks based on the revenue and profitability we have and how much we can spend on security that we're going to have to accept. Effective CISOs accept risk. Now, they make the executives aware and everyone's on board, but an effective CISO is going to accept some risks and focus on the highest priority item. And then an effective CISO, as we start to wrap up, communicates and speaks in business to other executives. They don't talk techie to the other executives. They don't go in and talk about false positives and false negatives and attack vectors and all those. Effective CISOs speak the language of business, which is 4 things. This could happen. Here's the likelihood of it happening. Here's the cost if it happens, and here's the cost to fix it. And effective CISOs only present risks that shouldn't be accepted. Why would you go in and go to the executives and say, hey, here's a risk that has a 10% chance of occurring. If it occurs, it will cost us $300K, and I want $1 million to fix it. It's crazy. Why would you do that? Why would you spend $1 million to fix a very low risk that's going to only cost 1/3 of that if it actually happens? It's crazy. You accept that risk. But if there's a risk that has a 95% chance of occurring, if it occurs, it costs you $10 million, and you want $200K to fix it, that is the risk you bring to them. And if you are trusted and they believe that you have the business interests at heart, you will always get to $200K. Because if that is truly true, where it's 90%, 95% chance of occurring, costs $10 million and $200K to lower that, that is an unacceptable risk, and you should, if you do it correctly, get the money. Companies always laugh because when I go in and I help them or work on training their CISOs, and I brief the executives, and they know and trust me because I've worked with them for a while, whenever I ask for additional resources or budget, I have almost 100% success rate because I'm going to only ask for things that are a no-brainer. Who is not going to spend $200K to fix a $10 million risk that's a guarantee? It's crazy. Of course you would. So if you're not getting the budget you need, if you're not getting the resources that you asked for, look and say, okay, am I looking at the business first? Am I presenting it in a way that they understand? And am I only focusing on fixing the risks that almost have a guarantee, where the return is a no-brainer? Effective CISOs focus on chief officer. They focus on the business. And if you do that long enough, you have the trust of all the other chief officers. So when you ask for resources, they know you're coming at it from a chief officer standpoint and not a cybersecurity standpoint. And over time, you build that respect. And effective CISOs get the resources that are needed, that they must have, not the resources they necessarily want. So in your organization, go and give yourself a little spot check. How effective are you in communicating and getting what you need? And if not, focus a lot more on the C&O and focus a lot less on the IS. An effective CISO is a chief officer first and an information security executive second. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Life of a CISO on being an effective CISO, and I look forward to seeing you next week.